In September 2018, a company most people had never heard of did something extraordinary. It knocked a 148-year-old bank out of Germany's most prestigious stock index and took its place. Its name was Wirecard. On paper, it was the future of European finance, a payments empire worth 24 billion euros. Card, $24 billion, Europe's fintech darling. There was just one problem. A very large part of it did not exist. Nearly 2 billion euros. Cash that was supposed to be sitting safely in bank accounts in the Philippines was simply not there. It had never been there. And the most disturbing part of this story isn't the missing money. It's that for years, the people who tried to warn the world were the ones treated like criminals, while the company was protected by the German state itself. This is how the truth became the crime. To understand Wirecard, start with what it claimed to be. Founded in 1999 and rescued from near collapse by a young Austrian consultant named Markus Braun, Wirecard sold itself as the company quietly powering the digital economy, processing card payments for thousands of businesses you'd never see. Complex, technical, invisible. Exactly the kind of business that is very hard for an outsider to check, because the real engine of Wirecard's reported profits was on the other side of the world. Much of its money supposedly came from something called third-party acquiring, partner companies in Asia that processed payments on Wirecard's behalf and sent the profits home. It was the perfect place to hide a lie. Far away, hard to audit, wrapped in jargon, and the numbers kept going up. Every year, bigger revenues, bigger profits, a soaring share price. Investors piled in, analysts cheered. Wirecard wasn't just a company anymore, it was a symbol of German engineering genius, proof that Europe could build a tech champion to rival Silicon Valley. To doubt Wirecard was somehow to doubt Germany itself. But someone was doubting. At the Financial Times in London, a reporter named Dan McCrum had been pulling at the threads for years. Tips from short sellers, documents from a whistleblower in Singapore, contracts that didn't add up, customers that seemed too small to generate the profits claimed. The deeper he dug, the stranger it got. Card, 5 years, one reporter, one story. In January 2019, the Financial Times published its most damning story yet. Allegations of forged contracts and falsified accounts inside Wirecard. This was the moment the fraud should have unraveled. Instead, something almost unbelievable happened. Wirecard's answer was always the same. The journalists were lying, paid by speculators, betting the stock would fall. And Germany's financial regulator, BaFin, the very body meant to police the markets, believed the company, not the evidence. It opened an investigation, but not into Wirecard. BaFin filed a criminal complaint against the Financial Times journalists, accusing them of market manipulation. And then it did something no German regulator had ever done for a single company. It banned investors from betting against Wirecard's stock for 2 months. Read that again. Faced with detailed allegations of fraud, the state's response was to protect the accused and go after the reporters. For McCrum, it was crushing. He was investigated by police, smeared as a criminal, watched by private spies. The pressure nearly broke him, and for a while, it worked. Wirecard's share price recovered. The establishment closed ranks. The lie held. What finally cracked it was the simplest question in accounting. Show me the money. Under mounting pressure, Wirecard's auditors at EY were finally forced to do what should have been done years earlier, directly confirm that the cash actually existed. They asked the 2 banks in the Philippines, that supposedly held nearly €2 billion of Wirecard's money. The banks replied that the documents were forged, that the accounts did not exist, that Wirecard was not even their client. Card were $900,000, cash that was never there. On June 18, 2020, Wirecard admitted the money was missing. The share price collapsed more than 80% in days. A week later, the company that had been worth €24 billion filed for insolvency, the first member of Germany's elite DAX index ever to go bankrupt. The symbol of German finance was now a crime scene. Markus Braun, the CEO who had promised the future, turned himself in and was arrested. He denies wrongdoing and calls himself a victim of others. His trial in Munich grinds on to this day. But Braun is not the reason this story became legend. That distinction belongs to the man who ran the Asian operations, the ones at the very heart of the fraud. His name was Jan Marsalek, and on June 19, 2020, as the company burned, he vanished. He drove from Munich to a small airfield outside Vienna, boarded a chartered jet, and flew to Minsk. The next day, he crossed into Russia, and there, the story of a payments company turned into something else entirely. Because according to investigators at Bellingcat, The Insider, and prosecutors across Europe, Jan Marsalek had not just been a fraudster. For roughly a decade, they allege, he had been an agent of Russian military intelligence, the GRU. The man overseeing a company wired into Europe's financial plumbing was, they say, working for the Kremlin the entire time. He resurfaced under a false identity and has been linked to a Russian spy cell whose operatives were convicted in London in 2025. He remains one of the most wanted men in Europe. So step back and look at what this really was. Not just a company that faked its profits. Those come along often enough. This was a fraud that a national regulator defended, that a Big Four auditor waved through for years, that punished the journalists who told the truth and whose chief operating officer escaped into the arms of a hostile intelligence service. The lesson of Wirecard isn't that one man lied. It's how many powerful institutions needed the lie to be true, and how they turned on the few people brave enough to say it wasn't. The fraud hid in plain sight for half a decade. Everyone had the tools to check it. Almost nobody wanted to. Next case file: a Wall Street bank, a Hollywood movie, and $4.5 billion stolen from an entire country. Subscribe